Check, check, check. This is just a test. Continue your business. See, it's dropping those levels as I'm talking over here. Check, 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 check.
Check test.
Loud and clear, Daniel. Can you hear us? Or can you hear me? Okay, great, James. Sounds good. Thanks for all your work on this.
Good afternoon, everyone. Everyone's hugging the back. What's that about? Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Well, welcome to the General Faculty and Convocation. My name is Andrea Hunter, and I'm affirmed by the pronouns she, her, and hers. And as immediate past chair, I'm the associate chair of the General Faculty and the Faculty Senate, and I am now called this meeting to order. Well, one of the things I wanted to do is to acknowledge our new faculty of all stripes. So, and to welcome you to the general faculty and to UNC Greensboro. So would you all stand, all the new faculty that are here, for a warm welcome from your colleagues? Well, we can applaud them in their absence. How about that? Yeah, you get out and talk to the new general faculty and tell them how important this meeting is. Well, I'm standing in today for our chair, Anthony Chow, who's away at a conference, but he's with us here. Oh, he's already with us.
Hi, Andrea.
Hi. Okay, so there he is on remote. So who will provide the opening remarks for our meeting, our first meeting of this academic year? Anthony?
Oh, yeah. Cam, go ahead. Next slide. First of all, I want to apologize for not being there with you. I'm here in Knoxville, Tennessee for the LIS Educator Conference. I've got a presentation today and a presentation tomorrow, so forgive the haggard appearance. You know how it is traveling to conferences and the go associated with them. So my apologies for not being there. However, I'm glad to be able to join you virtually. So as Andrea said, welcome to a new semester in our first general faculty meeting. Also, would be remiss to not remind you of the faculty reception. So UTLC and the Faculty Senate will be having a joint reception at the Faculty Center right after our meeting. So please try to join us there. Next slide. Is access to the slides and handouts for today. If you go to uncg.edu/GF General Faculty Handouts, you can see all of the handouts that we'll be presenting today on your own device. So for easier viewing, also special thanks to John Comer and the Alumni House. They are working on getting several large screen TVs that will also help with future viewing of slides and content. So, and also I want to actually apologize for not thanking all of the folks that have made this meeting possible. I greatly appreciate all the time and effort. Just so you know, we as a group met about an hour ago actually to get all of the audio and video and everything set up. So thank you all for your time and preparation. Cam. So again, a general welcome, and I just want to tell you how honored I am to be able to serve as your Faculty Senate Chair. It's a great privilege, and I look forward to serving you, everyone at UNCG, faculty, students, and staff to the best of my abilities. A couple of quick announcements, additional announcements to sign in. So if you would please go to go.uncg.edu/GF meeting to sign in. We are certainly curious to know who attends our meetings, and you have my apologies for not doing a better job of announcing this meeting due to several internal challenges. And as I mentioned, the handouts are there as well. You could also join us virtually. So one of the other things we want to do is, of course, make this available to faculty across campus, just in case you are also away at a conference, to maximize communication and availability, and also to provide instant message and text communication as well. So if you are interested, feel free to go to uncg.webex.com/join/facsend, where you could also engage in instant message text during meetings. Also want to emphasize how much effort and work and infrastructure the Faculty Senate represents. So certainly when I was there in the general faculty gallery, I had never really realized how much effort and time and resources are involved in the Faculty Senate. So I want to definitely applaud all of my predecessors, in particular Andrea Hunter, who helped oversee the development of our website. So facultysenate.uncg.edu is our website. I'm not going to go into the large infrastructure very much, but we are 24 committees, over 400 faculty and administration involved in those 24 committees. So there's quite a bit of infrastructure. And again, I thank everyone for their time and effort making all of this possible. Before I turn it over to Brad to approve the minutes, I also want to provide a few quick UNC system updates. So Brad, next slide. First thing, and I think to establish also the value and importance of Faculty Senate is that we are, of course, very active on the system as a level as well. So there are a lot of handouts or a lot of information and things going that are very important to all of us. And so if you get a chance to look at the summary included in the handout folder, the link that I just shared with you, bottom line is there's a lot of things going on. So the first thing is that Harry Smith, the chair of the Board of Governors, resigned yesterday. So that's, of course, very important because we're also in the middle of a search for a new president. But I will also say, too, one of the reasons why, as I become more aware of the Board of Governors, that I find that this a little concerning is he pointed out how much time and effort it takes to serve on a volunteer basis to head up the entire Board of Governors. And as a faculty member, one of the things that I've been talking to other colleagues about is a little bit of a concern that our Board of Governors, who's of course in charge of the UNC system, are based on complete volunteers. And this is another example of how that could prove to be a challenge. The next thing is search for the UNC president. So that is underway now. And one of the requests that the Faculty Assembly, the UNC System Faculty Assembly, which is all 17 institutions, approximately 4 representatives from each university, we have proposed a plan that a Faculty Senate chair, each of the chairs of the 17 institutions, would actually sit on the Faculty Search Committee. So that is still being discussed, but that is our hope, so that we ensure that each campus has one vote and one voice in this search. So stay tuned for that. The next thing is salary raises. So interestingly enough, the HR director pointed out for the second time consecutively in the last 18 years, the faculty salaries or university and community college salaries have been separated from the general state employee salary. So while the general, well, it's been approved that the state employees will receive a general 2.5% raise, the faculty for or the university and community college system has been separated from that, and at this point the amount proposed is a 0.5% raise. So we have to keep a close eye on that, and even the HR director suggested that this is a very unique situation. Is due to faculty assembly pressure from last year, a large white paper that we wrote. HR, then this is the UNC system. HR is creating a benchmarking salary dashboard which will be functional in spring 2020. And what's great about that is it basically is going to be a massive database looking to compare our salaries with our peer institutions across ranks and across a number of different things. So this should help us make a data-driven case, or at least understand to what extent are our salaries low or high compared to our peers. And the general sense from HR is that indeed our salaries are low compared to our peers, but again, we need to make sure we have good data. So I'm very excited about that and very much thankful that they're doing that. There's also a push to have faculty senate chairs serve as EO on a board of trustees. Basically, right now, only 6 of the 17 institutions actually have a faculty member on the board of trustees. Ex officio means that we would not have a vote, but still have a voice on the institutional board of trustees. So there seems to be consensus amongst the 17 institutions that certainly standardization of that needs to happen. And then the last thing is, interesting enough, while salaries are a concern, the recruitment intention fund for faculty has doubled. And so one of the concerns also brought up by HR, this might set a precedent for in order to get a raise, one must look for another job. And so certainly we need to keep a close eye on that. And by all means, that is not an explicit statement, but by the fact that, again, that retention and recruitment fund has been doubled while salaries remain static, does raise some interesting questions in terms of prioritization. So anyway, I just wanted to share those with you. I'm actually on the executive council and the secretary for the faculty assembly. So obviously I'll have a lot of unique insight, direct insight. In fact, I'm in charge of preparing the summary that's available in your handout. So anyway, thank you so much. And I'll hand it over to Brad and Andrea.
So the minutes from the last general faculty meeting back in the spring were distributed in the agenda packet. Are there any corrections or updates to those minutes?
All those in favor of approving the minutes as they stand without correction, please say aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Next, we will move on to the provost's welcome. And I'm going to yield my concluding 5 minutes to the provost should she need additional time. Provost Dunn?
Thank you very much, Andrea. Pleased to be here with you today, and I will indeed be brief. I'm going to share information on what I consider to be a few highlights, and then say a word about the changing landscape ahead. You may recall that in past years, I have used my time here, slightly longer allocation of time, to go through a resource allocation presentation from the prior year, and I had committed in the spirit of transparency to continue doing this. When allocated 10 minutes for this meeting, I realized that that probably was not going to be manageable. So what I have elected to do instead is reach out to the chair of the Senate Budget Committee and offer to do that presentation there, and then they can make that information available to you or bring it back in whatever form. So the presentation is prepared, and we're happy to share. I was going to begin with a bad joke and say I'm not doing the presentation because we have no new resources. And if the presentation were about this current year, unfortunately, that would largely be the truth. But the way we have structured this is that in the fall, I present the information on how the prior year's resources were allocated. And we were at that time still growing and did have substantial new university revenue. So that information is forthcoming to you through some mechanism with the Senate Budget Committee. Well, I hope everybody settled nicely into the new academic year despite the exciting start with a gas leak on the first day of classes and 10 campus buildings being evacuated. That was a lot of excitement, and that's not the kind of excitement we like to have. We like to start the semester with momentum and a sense of accomplishment and a kind of excitement about what lies ahead. There's much good news, I think, to celebrate at this point in the academic year. We opened our fall semester with 89 new faculty on board, and 27 of those faculty represent expansion lines, that is, new lines to the university. Clearly, our university growth has been beneficial in terms of our ability to grow faculty size. We also opened the semester with a record, all-time record number of students, 20,199 students. Early, we had many new administrative hires, new positions largely, but replacement hires, 5 new academic deans, 3 of those in academic units, 1 in online learning, and 1 a new position, an associate vice chancellor for student success and dean of undergraduate studies. So much new, shall I say, talent and human resources in place for the new academic year. We also launched 4 new academic programs this year. That's a rather ambitious undertaking. One of the programs is an undergraduate program, a bachelor's in information science, and 3 are graduate programs, a master's in informatics and analytics, and a PhD program in social work, joint with North Carolina A&T, and a PhD program in management, fully online, one of few of its kind in the world. I mention these programs here and will also share that they were critically important in helping us grow graduate enrollment from last year to this, something that is another piece of very good news for the current year. We launched this semester with a new student success program of significance. I've mentioned to you briefly in the past that we received significant funding from the Edwin Armfield Foundation to launch a new academic success coaching program for our first-year students. The launch was successful, and in the first year of the program, we are serving 125 new first-year students, and the coaches in the program are all UNC Greensboro graduate students. So this program has mutual benefits, if you will, to students at all levels. We began the year on a high in terms of university research activity. There's every indication that our investments in research are paying off for us. The dissemination of information through the outlets common in all your disciplines seems to be at a very high level. It's hard to say an all-time high because this is a little harder to quantify, but the data are very positive. What is a little easier to quantify is extramural funding for research, and we continue to see increases year to year. This year, a 6.38% increase over prior year in an increasingly competitive funding environment. And I'm very pleased to say that we are approaching $40 million on an annual basis in terms of extramural funding. If we break that, I believe that will be a university record. We continue to garner accolades and rankings of significance, and I'm only going to mention one here today. You may have caught this in the Campus Weekly or other local press, but we were noted by U.S. News and World Report to be the institution in North Carolina most likely to promote the greatest amount of social mobility for our graduates. That's a very important accolade for the institution. Our strategic plan says we are about transformation, student transformation, knowledge transformation, and regional transformation. And clearly promoting social mobility ties directly into student transformation and regional transformation. By the way, we're 27th in the nation. That's not bad either. We have some mixed news on the enrollment front. I told you we have a record number of students. We're up about 0.5% in terms of head count enrollment. At the same time, unfortunately, we are down in student credit hour production. Student credit hours are the metric by which we are funded, and we're down 0.9% overall in credit hours. If you're puzzled as to how we can be up in bodies and down in credit hours, it simply means we have more students, but they're taking fewer hours. We think one of the key drivers in this pattern is the graduate student growth that we have seen. Part of the reason we have more students today is that for the first time in many years, we had an increase in graduate enrollment. This is something that is difficult to achieve in the current landscape, and we should be very proud of the work that you are all doing and the work in the graduate school with new programs like the Minerva Scholars Program and also, of course, the new graduate program launches. Where the news on enrollment is not as good is what we are seeing at the beginning of the pipeline, the traditional first-year students who come to us. We had a decline in first-year students and a fairly significant one of 7.8%. We knew that a decline in first-year students was on the horizon. We expected we might see it as early as this fall. But I'll be candid and tell you the magnitude of this decline is somewhat greater than we had anticipated. In talking with our peer institutions, the patterns there are varied, but some also felt this a little earlier than we expected. You're probably aware that it's demographic shifts in the population that are fueling this. It's not that we're getting a smaller market share necessarily, it's that the numbers of students coming out of the high schools are shrinking. It means that we're going to have to do some things differently in the future, and I'll return to that in just a moment. Finally, I'll share that we saw yet again growth in online education. We see this year to year, and this seems to be one of the things that is driving either growth or stability in student credit hour production. What we see in enrollment patterns tells us that going forward, we're going to see a more diversified student portfolio. Here, I'm not talking about diversity in the sense of the ethnicity of our students, not diversity in the forms that we typically refer to when we speak of diversity and inclusion, but diversity in the form of the routes through which the students come to us. Many more students going forward will be coming to us from community colleges or after having exited the institution, stopping out and then coming back to us, what we sometimes call partway home students. Further, online students and often fully online students will continue to be a growing part of our student portfolio. Traditional students will always be an important part of who we are. We have almost 6,000 of them living in our residence halls, so we're still a densely rich residential campus, but that's not going to be growing. And this year, for the first time in a very long time, housing felt the impact of the decline in first-year students and actually had to mobilize at the last minute to achieve 100% occupancy by reaching out to other students that typically we didn't have housing available for. I do ask that you all reflect a little bit beyond this meeting on these changing patterns, because they do mean that we're going to have to do some things differently in the future. We need to be very vigilant about assessing how we serve all students, and we have been quite focused on traditional undergraduate students as a key segment of our student body, and these emerging segments, if you will, are students that we must be sure that we can serve well to ensure their success. We're going to need to have a renewed emphasis on student retention going forward. We're pleased to have a new Vice Chancellor for Student Success on board who can help lead the charge here to ensure that we are putting in place all the strategies and actions required. A new task force has recently been announced that is going to look at retention and graduation rates. And while we have much to be proud of in terms of accolades in this area, we also have much, much more to do. If one actually looks at the data on retention and graduation rates, improvements have been only slight over the last many years, rather steady. And there are some statistics we might examine, like the number of students who fail out of a course in their first year, or the number of students we lose overall at the university, that really don't give us reason to celebrate. So we're going to have to redouble our efforts and take on some of these more challenging issues, like high course failure rates. Clearly, there are lines of attack that aren't easy, and we're going to have to go beyond nibbling around the edges and deal with these head on. And I look forward, in all sincerity, to working with faculty experts in these areas because I'm confident we can make progress. You heard an announcement earlier, most likely, about millennial campus initiatives. So I'm not going to reiterate that. I'll simply tell you, if you've not followed that news, you will want to do so because there's an announcement of some new projects in the Millennial Campus District that will be significant and bring a new value to the academic enterprise. We're hopeful that sometime in the future, hopefully not too far into the future, we'll get a budget. And when we do, we are very hopeful that that budget will have $84 million in it for our university library renovation and expansion. That will be a very important addition to university space and a significant one. This is not just about renovating a building where renovation is much needed, but bringing us convening space, classroom space, exhibit and display space, something that will touch all parts of the campus. There's an issue that has been looming large for many years now that seems to be even more concerning at present. And while I don't want to move to something less than positive to conclude, I feel a little bit compelled to at least raise the issue here with you today because I do think it's something we're going to need to be more focused on going forward. And it's the issue of student mental health. We've spoken about this on a few past occasions in faculty senate meetings. About a year ago, our Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs gathered national data, some patterns that were very concerning about student mental health challenges, and then compared to UNC Greensboro data to show that yes, indeed, we have the national patterns present, and in fact, in many areas of concern, a higher incidence rate. I'm sorry to report that we've begun this year with every indication of sharp increases over prior years. I was astonished about a week ago when visiting with some student affairs directors to hear their reports that they were seeing increases of the magnitude of 600+% in terms of emergency walk-ins for mental health counseling. Think about that, fall to fall increases of over 600%. On one day alone, it was a Friday the 13th, the most recent one, we had 5 students in one day who had to have transports due to suicide-related concerns, that is hospital transports. I just share those 2 statistics because they are somewhat representative of the very serious challenges that we must navigate, and they're serious for all manner of reasons. Obviously, we care very much as a university that cares about the holistic health and wellness of our students. We also know that these challenges are academic challenges. Students cannot be academically successful when these stressors loom so large in their lives. So we'll hear more about these issues, and as a university, we will find ways to do more. More is not just more mental health counselors, it's increased awareness and action on all our parts. And we will innovate and we will stretch and we will all be a part of addressing this serious concern. I was going to conclude by saying a word about the landscape for faculty raises, because I know it's on everyone's mind. Anthony mentioned it, and I think it's important in terms of expectation setting to let you know that the news for the current cycle is not good news. He shared with you that faculty were omitted from the state pool, and a separate pool of money was given to the system. If this comes to fruition through a budget, that pool of money is only $50 million for 17 campuses, and we must spread that across categories of employees, and we do not yet have detailed instructions from system as to how that will work. I can only tell you if the funds were to reach everyone, and that may not be the case. In fact, it's likely that it will not. It would be less than 0.5% to pool. So the news is not good because we are not growing as an institution in terms of credit hours. We are not in a position this year to bring significant institutional resources to bear to supplement the pool, as we have sometimes done in past years. We'll share more with you when we get more information, but we won't get that information until we have a budget. So that's just a quick overview of some things on my mind, some highlights, some positives, some challenges. All in all, I think this institution has momentum. We are in a good place relative to most of our peers, but a challenging landscape to navigate. I think we have expertise and talent. Some resident for some time and much new talent on this campus, and I'm optimistic that we will embrace the challenges ahead and continue to forge a bright future for UNC Greensboro. So thank you very much for being here today. Thank you. Thank you. Would you like to read them to me? So who will be on the university? Very good questions. In terms of the task force, we'll be putting up a website that will contain membership materials as developed, and there will likely be outreach to gather information much more broadly than beyond the membership. I do not have the task force membership in my head, so rather than try to share it hit and miss with you, I'd capture some, not all. I will tell you that there is fairly broad-based representation on the task force, and if you'll reach out to me, I can share that, or we'll be putting the information up and pushing it out very soon. It was only last week that the communications went out to constitute the group. The task force will be comprised primarily of faculty and then also professional staff who are student success professionals and student affairs professionals. We're trying to approach this project very holistically because we know it takes the work of all to be successful. In terms of the demographics of students who are experiencing mental health concerns and their majors, I presume we collect these data at least for certain kinds of encounters with our students. For counseling sessions, for example. I'll have to check with our mental health professionals to see what we can bring to you, and we can make arrangements to do that at a future faculty senate meeting if of interest. I don't have the answer to that question. I don't know if there is disciplinary patterning. It's a legitimate question to ask because we know that stressors are often the precipitating factors. We'll get you what information we have on that. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm not accustomed to this format yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost Dunn. We're going to continue to follow the order of the agenda. Should we need just a little bit more time, our parliamentarian is here, and we may ask for a little short extension if needed. Now we're going to have the Faculty Senate General Education Council talk about the new general education proposal, including the chair of the council, Erin Terranova, and also the co-chairs of the, what I call Gerda 2, Amy Harris Hook and Jody Petazzoni. And as you know, we're in the middle of what I like to call the relay race. So please.
Thank you very much. I'm Jody Petazzoni, and my colleague Amy Harris-Hoke and I were co-chairs for this task force, or are co-chairs. We are still doing our work. And Erin Terranova is the General Education Council chair. So we would like to tell you about the proposal that is at hand. So first slide, please. These are the task force members. We wanted to make sure that you understood that there is representation from all of the academic units on campus. In addition, we have some ex officio members from student success areas across campus who are also involved in the process. I would love to read every one of these names because they not only deserve recognition, but they deserve a round of applause, each and every one of them, for all of the work that they have done over this summer, starting at the beginning of June and continuing through today until next week, until we hand this off to the General Education Council. Their efforts have been enormous. We have all been committed. We have all worked hard, and our primary motivation has been what's the best interest for the students at UNC Greensboro. We have to thank many, many people. We, again, don't have time for this to read each one out loud, but we have to recognize our predecessors, Chuck Bolton and Alice Hattie, who led us through the initial phases of this. And we added one at the end today, and I think that you guys are going to want to give him a round of applause too. Will Bledsoe in the Office of the University Registrar helped us put together a mock-up of this program in DegreeWorks so that you could see what students will see as they're trying to look at their degree clearing process. And we found it incredibly informative, so we're very grateful to Will, but we'll move on. We'll start with the faculty resolution that was passed in May of 2019. We were given some orders in this resolution. We were told that the competency-based framework was a framework that they could endorse, but they wanted a little bit more information. We were also told that competencies 1 through 5, which are listed right here, were also notions, ideas, contents that they could get behind. So they wanted to see those included in the next program. And then they also endorsed that there would be several what we called last year areas of knowledge. They endorsed the humanities, social and behavioral, and natural sciences to be included in some way in the revised general education program. So we knew that we were directed to do these things. Next slide. Thank you. But we also knew that there were some questions. And these were the 5 recommendations that were included in the resolution that was passed in May. While they liked the competency-based framework, they wanted some more information. They wanted to know if there were different approaches, what the implementation issues might be. They also wanted some more information about the thematic seminar that had been presented. The thematic seminar is a combination academic and transition course, and they wanted to understand some more details about the implementation, the relationship to existing courses, and the impact on transfers, among other things. We also included a health and wellness course competency in the proposal that was in the spring, and they needed some more information. While the notion was out there and there was support for it, there were also questions. So we needed to revisit that competency. And that was the same for competencies 6 and 7, which relate to global and diversity and equity learning. There needed to be more details conveyed about what those would contain and how they would be defined. And then finally, the fifth recommendation related to the implementation of this process, and that directly relates to the mock-up that I mentioned earlier. So we will move on. This is what has been put together. First and foremost, this task force was told that we had 33 to 34 credit hours to work with, and that whatever was included in the program had to fall within those credit hours. And there were a number of reasons for that, but that was the number that was included in the resolution, and we didn't have wiggle room. So what we decided to do in looking at all of the items that were identified for this program and all of the research and information gathering that was done related to those outstanding items that we were told to research more deeply, we came up with a list of 11 competencies. And we're calling them competencies, and we're defining that as things that students should know or be able to do when they complete this foundational general education program. And I think that it's really important to note that this general education program is put together as a foundational program. We are not arguing that our students are going to have deep knowledge in any of these competencies, but that they will be introduced to them. And by introducing these competencies to our students, we give ourselves the opportunity to further develop them within the majors. So the list of 11 is here. I could read all of them to you, but they include the 5 competencies that were endorsed, plus the 2 competencies 6 and 7, global and diversity, that we did some further research on, and health and wellness. Those were all supported by the research and the work that was done over the summer. And then we addressed some of the other competencies with specific course described items. So next, thank you. And this is the process that we went through. We knew that we had to provide you all with more details of what these competencies would include. And we also knew that we had to reach out to the subject matter experts in order to understand more deeply how each of these would look. So we engaged quite a number of faculty. We had more than 45 faculty working on this over the summer. That's a lot of people who committed themselves to this project and to this process. So we reached out to experts in written communication, oral communication, information literacy, et cetera, and we said to them, can you help us deeply understand what these competencies will look like in a general education program? And we asked them to define each of them clearly, to develop student learning outcomes, to provide a rationale for including each of these competencies in the revised program, and to identify existing courses or course types that we already offer that could be included in the program. And we gave them a deadline of August 1, and they all came through for us. We got phenomenal work, and we got it turned in on time, and it really contributed to what we understand, what we see as the success of this proposal. I'm going to turn it over to Amy to talk us through the competencies.
Hi. So as Jody said, we engaged with lots of experts from across campus. And now what the task force is working on is taking all of the information and the learning outcomes and the definitions and looking at them all holistically as they'll fit together as a program. So what we're sharing with you now is largely the drafts as proposed by the individual groups of faculty. But again, the task force is looking at all of them as a whole to kind of make sure that we have a cohesive program with learning outcomes that make sense across the scope of the program. So please keep that in mind. So of course, one of the competencies is oral communication. And one thing that I wanted to point out about this one specifically is that it's not just presentation skills. The group that worked on the oral communication competency really wanted to focus on presentation skills, but also on interaction, small group interaction, really underlying the information necessary to be able to be a good speaker, both in a formal and informal situation, which is something that we've heard from faculty that is very interesting to students, not just how to give a presentation, but how to raise your hand in class and make a logical argument in a more informal way. So next, and I will not be reading these to you because you can all read. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about them. Also, I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions. So, okay, so next, Cam, thank you. So written communication, this is another one that we've heard previously that we want students to know how to write. So this is related to that. And in this would be a foundational written communication course that focuses on writing and revision, shaping text for different audiences, and also thinking about the process of writing and revising and editing. Next. So quantitative reasoning is a course that's designed to teach students how to do mathematical things, justify conclusions based on quantitative arguments. I'm a librarian, not a math person. So this is the quantitative reasoning requirement. As we looked at this requirement, we looked at the work of the Math Pathways program, which is a UNC system-wide program, and that the quantitative reasoning requirement will fit in with the Math Pathways program that is in process of being implemented. The Foundations course, next, yeah, thank you, is this was one of the areas for further study, and what we decided in looking at this course further is, first of all, that it is implementable. That was the main concern of the Faculty Senate, was that we wouldn't be able to mount enough sections of a smaller, hopefully seminar style class that students would be able to take, but we found existing structures such as the freshman seminar class and the FYE program with some adjustments and tweaks that we would actually be able to accommodate our incoming freshman class in those sorts of courses. We do call it Foundations, though. We took away the seminar name just because of the concern that during the implementation process, we felt that we needed a little bit of flexibility to, I think that my dream as somebody who spent a lot of time working on this course is, small sections of classes where you can sit around in a circle and, have lots of interaction with faculty, which is closely linked to student success. But we know that during the transition period, we may need some flexibility on that front. This course would incorporate student success related content, some how to do college, along with academic content in a faculty member's area of expertise, as well as information literacy. So they'll be learning about, student success content, things like note taking and how to be part of a community in the context of an academic course. Next. The health and wellness requirement was another area for further study. This is one requirement that we heard from students that they were very interested in this, and I appreciate Provost Dunn's comments about student mental health on campus. I think that we all realize that this is an important issue, and this is one small way that perhaps the general education program can contribute. The health and wellness requirement will also include information literacy and sort of how students seek information and find reliable information in the context of health and wellness. And then critical thinking, which is the next one. So critical thinking will actually appear in three areas. They're now called critical thinking and inquiry in humanities and fine arts, in social and behavioral sciences, and in the natural sciences. So there will be critical thinking student learning outcomes in each of those courses, as well as a student learning outcome related to inquiry. Then we have natural science with data analysis and interpretation. So this is something that wasn't in the original program, but it came up as a result of conversations with natural science faculty who told us that this is a very important skill for students to have introduced to them in these early stages of their time at UNCG. So we would use the natural science context to discuss data analysis and interpretation. And this would be where the lab science lives. So that would be this class would be required to have a lab. So it'd be the either 3 or 4 credits, depending on which course it is. Then the global. So global and multicultural can be fulfilled by either a humanities and fine arts course or by social and behavioral science course. And this is focusing largely on global context, global cultures, cultural perspectives, things like that. And then diversity and equity is the same way. It can be fulfilled by a course either in the humanities and fine arts or in social and behavioral sciences. And that one is more related to diversity and equity. So, yeah. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Aaron.
Thank you, Amy. Aaron Turnova, General Education Chair. Did you guys see the symbolism there? Gert handing it over to Gen Ed Council. Did anyone pick up on that? They didn't now because I had to tell them. I had to explain my own joke. That's never a good sign. So let's talk about implementation because this has been a big one. It can be implemented. And one of the charges or one of the feedback was, let's make it streamlined and simple so everyone understands it. And I think when you see what we did here, you can see how we implemented it. So one competency attribute, we're calling them attribute to a course. No more markers. So don't use the M word ever again. Markers are over. The competencies are going to be associated with specific courses. We are not going to have one section have an attribute and another section not have an attribute. If it's on the course, every section, every instructor who teaches it, you have that attribute. That's going to help confusion for students and advisors tremendously. There is an implementation plan. We're working with the implementation committee on this and how we can actually do it. So we have people right now in the trenches trying to figure that and how we can further implement it. What that really means, though, is we are going to be running parallel gen ed programs for a while. We have to do that, okay? We cannot just flip a switch. That'll be way too confusing. That'll really cause a mucky muck. That's a scientific word. So we will be running parallel programs. I think when I heard from the registrar office, when we switched from Aller, that was a 7-year transition, okay? And that's just because students may be rolling out, they come back, it happens. So this is going to be a long process of as students attrition out, they will be moving in, et cetera. So just be aware of that. It's not going to be a quick fix. And no matter what program we put in, that's going to happen. Okay, so it's not just about this one program. There's going to be time for double programs and dual programs to roll. So next slide, please. So what Will Bledsoe did in registrar's office is this is an actual student. This is an interior architecture major. Don't worry about the grades and stuff, okay? So skip over that part. But this is what their degree works currently looks like for the gen ed program. And you can see as the coding works, every blue banner is a block. And that's how it is coded in DegreeWorks. That's how you generate credits and GPA, et cetera. It comes in these block forms. And you can see the top block, it says in a blurry fashion, semester hour required 33. That's nice, except you have two other blocks there. And this is where the old M word was. And that's why we could never tell how many credits were actually in our gen ed program, because some markers would roll up to categories, some didn't, et cetera. So you would have anywhere between a 33 to 45 credit gen ed program, and we never really knew what that looked like. Everyone know where I'm coming from this? So that was the old one. This is what the new one looks like. One block. Yes? What? I don't know if we can blow it up. I'm sure he can. I can walk you through it all. I'll just walk it through, and the language actually is exactly what Amy and Jody just went over, so the words haven't changed at all. But what you see is you have one block, and it's 33 credits. And we can scroll back. That work for everybody now? So what we have are, oh, we lost it. Isn't technology fun? No one touch anything. So this is what it looked like. We have, and we can, talk in registrar's office, they can tweak the presentation, et cetera, what's indented, what's not, et cetera. Okay, so don't get bogged down in that detail of it. But you're going to notice it's very clean right now. It's very clean. And you can't see it. I'm not going to ask anyone to move it, but right here are going to be where the attributes are. So right over Anthony's face, that's where the attributes is going to show up on the DegreeWorks. So students will see they need right there that attribute. They need 3 hours in that attribute. And those haven't been named yet. But when we do name them and they search for it in the course schedule, they will search for WC, written communication, all the courses that attribute will pull up, because that's how the students are going to be registering for the course. It's going to be neat. It's going to be very clean. And you can see if we scroll back to the left on the image, thank you, that you can see there are the other competencies embedded in the areas of knowledge. Again, we can tweak the language if we see it. But this is just one block, 33 credits. The 11 competencies are right there. Students will know exactly how they take it, when they take it, etc. And there's not going to be any double or dipping within this program. Right here, they have one course, one competency, 33 credits. That still allows 86 credits within the major, because we're only a 33 credit program for 120 credits, 86, 87, depending on whether or not you put a laboratory in there. Okay, so this is still a very nice, very clean version. Again, we can tweak language as we move on, but that's kind of what the mock-up will look like with DegreeWorks. Good. Next slide. And then just other things that we're going to consider moving forward, other aspects. The competencies can carry into the major, which is something that has been asked about. Even though you can't double dip within the Gen Ed program, we can carry some into the major. We cannot emphasize, this is a foundational program. This is 100, 200 level. This is going to be the basis for you building into your major. So written communication at this level, foundational. If you want to have 18 courses within your major at the 300, 400 level of writing, knock yourself out. We're building foundational. That's the idea of general education, breadth and foundational. That's going to be sort of a flip-flop from where we've been, where we have a lot of 300 level courses. And we have discussed how that's going to impact transfers, et cetera. So we know that about that. We have been discussing that. That's what the implementation team is going to be working on. And I think actually you already hit all that about the 86, 87 credits. That's about 71% of your 120 credit hours are still going to be dedicated to the major courses. And again, you can have some courses that are double dipping through major and through gen ed. And I know transfers and online students have been a very big portion. We have definitely been having multiple conversations of how best to have them come into the program, how they can transfer into the program and not be put behind their progress. And I'm going to turn it back over to Amy.
Talked about the timeline before. You may have heard that, and it seems to just get smaller and smaller every time because that's how time works. So by Monday at 11:59 p.m., the report is due to the General Education Council. Terry's laughing because she knows that it's going to be a lot of hours between now and then. So the report's due to the General Education Council from the task force by September 30th, again, 11:59 p.m. Okay, just make sure. So by October 8th, the General Education Council will have to vote on the resolution. We'll send the report, the council writes the resolution, votes on the resolution, and then by the 9th, the General Education Council will submit the resolution to Faculty Senate. That will go out in the agenda packet on the 9th, and then on October 16th, the Faculty Senate will consider the resolution from the General Education Council. Is that it? That's it. Okay. All right. Okay.
Bravo. As now that I can see, because thank you, Michael Frierson, for sending me the link. When I get into the competencies embedded in areas of knowledge, I see that there's 2 natural sciences required, 1 GSB, 1 humanities or fine arts, and then either or of humanities and social behavioral. How is that natural sciences have 2 required courses and none of the other knowledges have 2 required courses?
We've discussed this point. We've gotten lots of feedback on this point, and we have heard from campus that our students should have 2 sciences. So it is there because campus has told us that our students need 2 natural sciences. That we did a series when we were doing our self-study in the year 2017, 2018. We held a series of conversations. We met with faculty, we met with advisors, we met with students. And the information that we collected was 2 natural sciences is what all of our students need.
Aaron, you mentioned that the transition would take about 7 years. How much longer will there still be certifications for new markers, new WIs and new SIs?
That's a good question. Currently, right now, we are accepting, General Education Council is accepting new categories and markers. We actually just approved a couple at 2 meetings ago. So we are still approving those because regardless, we're still going to be running general education next year, the current program, right? But we haven't actually found the timeline yet for when we're going to cut that off and not allow current categories and markers to be brought in. I suppose once this is approved, whatever program is approved, we're going to have a meeting and sit down and say, okay, now that this new program is running, we'll have to work with registrar's office and say, when should we shut it off? So I'm purposely being evasive because we really haven't gone down that road yet and looked about when we're going to cut it off. I know currently we are accepting them for this. We're accepting them right now for the next academic year, but after that, we don't have any ideas what we're doing. So I know it's kind of a half answer, sorry.
This it's pretty small. Okay, thanks. Under foundations, it says written, oral. It's really small, but one of them says Spartan Foundations. Is that like how to live in a warrior society or something?
We decided to go with foundations for now. The name was just kind of we were thinking of it as sort of a, potential marketing point for the general education program. But in the interest of having people focus on the idea of the course and the content as opposed to the name, we are now just calling it foundations for now until the program actually, hopefully we start the implementation process. But it does still show up in some places, but we are referring to it and we'll refer to it in the final report as just foundations.
This may be getting down too into the nitty gritty, but hi, Erin. But previously, it was said that if a student changes their major, they would automatically change into the new system. That's going to result in a bunch of my students losing all the work that they've done. Will there be some sort of a system, kind of like electing a previous catalog year, where they can try to stay with what they've been?
No.
So
short answer is no.
Okay.
We have a policy now at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro that was not in place before and was problematic. The policy now states that a student chooses or is put into a catalog year. And the catalog that the student defaults to is the catalog that is in place when they begin their career or when they're admitted to UNC Greensboro. So if they start in fall of 2019, the catalog that is in place at the time that they start is the catalog that they will graduate under, unless a new catalog goes into place and they change their major when that new catalog is in place, and that is the catalog that the student assumes. And that means that they can't select to have the new degree and the old gen ed. It doesn't work that way. If you choose the new degree, you get everything that's in the catalog. Provost.
The question you ask is a very good one, and thank you for clarifying the policy, Jody. Have you all explored whether or not we have the latitude on campus to revisit that policy in this instance of change? I'd be very alarmed at what this would mean, knowing the rate of major changing we have here. I think it would be disastrous in terms of extra hours and driving dropout rate. So
we can talk to the registrar's office. Of course, what that will mean is that we will have to create in DegreeWorks for degree clearing purposes all of the new programs with all of the old gen ed in order to make those two things mesh. So I'm going to go ahead and say, of course, we can ask the registrar to consider that for us.
I think we will have to put some kind of workaround in place here. It's simply not feasible otherwise. We'll need to study the matter in depth and find the most efficient way to do it. I also think we'll want to take steps to ensure that the transition timeframe is no longer than necessary. I can't imagine, for instance, that we would intentionally run dual programs for more than 4 years. And even within that constraint, we'd probably be doing lots of waivers and substitutions.
Lots.
So it's going to be messy, and many things will have to be handled through, I'm going to use the word loosely, workarounds. But we have to keep the best interest of our students in mind. They need a rigorous education and a rigorous gen ed, but because we elected to transition at one point in time, we can't subject them to a total inability to change majors without having serious impacts for the university.
Well, just related to that, Jody, I've been in a lot of these meetings about catalog year, and as you well know, and the question that comes to my mind as I'm listening to you is what constitutes a new catalog? Because we get a new catalog every year.
I would have answered that question differently when this meeting started. So we're going to revisit that policy and involve the registrar's office in that conversation. And I'm going to defer the answer to that question until the registrar's office is involved. If departments are submitting new undergraduate courses at the 100, 200 level, would it be advantageous for the proposals to include a memo regarding how a new course might be grouped under new gen ed competencies?
I think it might be helpful, but again, we're not really sure. We did look hard and long and hard about seeing which courses would kind of fit within these new competencies. We're talking about the transition, seeing certain courses might fall underneath there. So it might not be bad. We actually did almost a reverse memo, a new course that does propose those at the 300 level, and the General Education Council actually put a memo in there saying this is a 300 level. We are approving it for the current gen ed program, but keep in mind the new gen ed may be only at 100 and 200. So just don't assume that this 300 course will simply just roll over to the new gen ed program if it rolls down to 100, 200. So we did kind of put a disclaimer and a memo in there to the last one we just approved. And again, that was a couple of weeks ago. So that's not a bad idea. I wouldn't know what the language would look like quite yet. But I also don't want to say, I think it may be grouped underneath here. And then they hold my feet to the fire and say, well, you said it was going to be under this competency, and then the SLOs don't match up. So I think it would have to be a very weak sort of, I think it may be here, 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 or here. I'll give them 5 options. But that's the best I can do right now.
Excuse me. Were you just saying that 300 level courses are not part of gen ed under this new system?
Well, it came up, it was on one of the slides that this gen ed program is going to be a foundational, so it's going to be 100 and 200 level courses. This has been in a lot of discussions, and there's a whole bunch of the feedback on that these would be 100, 200 level courses, and the big feedback was about the transfer students, et cetera. So we know this is still going to be an issue that we have to work out. But if a gen ed program is foundational in breadth, that is by definition the university 100 and 200 level. 300 and 400 levels are junior and senior. That's not foundational knowledge. And I know that there are exceptions, et cetera. We know, but that's where the program right now is foundational. It's geared to 100 and 200 level students.
Yeah, well, that's true of the program we have now, yet there are some 300 level courses that are in there for various good reasons, I believe. Is that policy changing or not? Policy that 300 level courses may get exceptions to be included.
Oh.
Well, I would.
Okay. I could give you an answer too.
I mean, I don't know what the policy is. I don't have the historical background on it.
I was in charge of that on the Gen Ed committee, but if you would like him to answer it, he could.
I can't answer, Regina, so next up, go get it.
All right. So when I was on the Gen Ed committee and I was in charge of that section, what we said is that 300 or 400 level courses could apply for these areas, but it did not say it. We specifically stated that you do not want 300 level courses to be in this foundational category. That submission had to tell us why specifically this course needed to be 300 level.
Right, so they can be in.
At that time, but if this is something new,
Well, that's what I'm
yeah.
asking, whether there's something new.
So this goes
So
back
that's
to
category.
the entire program is foundational across the board. This is all a foundational program. This goes back to a complicated series of pieces of information that have to be brought together. And the reason that we have identified 100 and 200 level is because they are defined in the university catalog as primarily intended for freshmen and for sophomores. That is the audience for this general education program. This is intended to be that level of learning. 300 level courses are defined in our catalog as primarily intended for juniors, and that is not what this general education program is intended for. There are additional considerations when discussing the 300 level courses. One of them is the policy that says that all students must have 36 credit hours at the 300 level or above. It does not say that they have to have general education courses available at the 300 level or above. The other component to this is funding. We are funded at a different level for 300 level courses, and that funding relates to the advanced level that is intended for those courses. This program is not an advanced program. And that is why 300 level courses have, for the moment, not been included in this program. The design of this program is for foundational courses and foundational levels of learning.
Right. I would submit that some 300 level courses are explicitly foundational. As a matter of fact, they're introductions to a somewhat more specialized area of a field, but they're at the introductory level nonetheless and have no prerequisites and can be taken by freshmen and sophomores. And many of those have been included in Gen Ed and perform the useful service also of giving transfer students a way of graduating in a timely way or not dropping out in frustration at fulfilling that 36 hours of 300 level or above credit while also meeting their Gen Ed requirements.
Sure, it's a complicated situation.
Right, so I think it could have egregious effects on retention and time to graduation rates, given that a very large percentage of our entering students are transfers.
So there are a lot of components to the conversation. Students have to earn 25% of the credit hours at the institution granting the degree. That means that all of our students coming in have to take at least 30 credits at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. If they are arriving here with 90 credits already, the chances that they still need a foundational general education course are very small. So there are a lot of considerations here. We've asked for data about this. I talked to the admissions office about collecting some of this information, but we need to have a data-driven reason to include 300 levels in this program. And the data-driven reason can't be that it's just more convenient for our students if they can check the box for Gen Ed and check the box for 36 credit hours at the 300 level or above, which, when we think about it, is intended to indicate rigor in a program. And it's difficult to reconcile the ideas of rigor at 300 level or above with a foundational general education program. So there's a lot of, we've got to get our logic straight on what these 300 level courses are, and we need to be consistent when we put the course number of 300 or above on a course. So there are a lot of considerations for this conversation. If we follow down that path and determine in the process of implementing this program that 300 level does indicate foundational learning and they should be included in this program, then that's the path that we'll take. But at this moment, that is not the indication.
This is a very challenging issue. I listened to Jody and I'm in full agreement with everything she says, but I also very much appreciate the issue that you're raising about the hardship that this will create for some number of our transfer students. And I am glad that we're looking into the patterns so we can get a better estimate there. I think we need to look for creative solutions where we can work to both maintain the purity of what the system should look like in terms of course levels, but have opportunities for hypothetically exceptions for students in terms of substituting courses that might meet individual students' needs if the numbers are not all that high. Or while a little bit unwieldy, there could be possibilities like cross-listing a course such that the course exists at 2 different levels and has similar content, but different requirements associated with it. We do that here currently. We do that to achieve honors objectives in courses that aren't honors courses. So I would urge everybody to think about these issues and look for some of these, not ideal, but creative workarounds that would prevent students from experiencing major hardship, but allow us to go forward with a rational model at the same time.
I think this is a real problem, and I wasn't aware of it until just now. In our own department, most of the writing intensive markers that we deliver are through 300 level courses. I'm assuming the equivalent would be to deliver the written competency. We just won't have the courses to do it. We would have to drop all of our 300 levels down to 200 levels. That would affect how much money we get from the state. It seems very serious to me, and I think we have to have a good, solid answer to those questions before we can vote on this.
So written intensive is not part of this program. Writing intensive, there are no.
I'm aware of that, but I'm aware that that's another big problem. But the equivalent is that competency which can be attached to a course, yes? Okay, we will not have the courses to attach it to if they are restricted to 200 and below.
So the great news is that the English department actually developed the written communication competency.
I know I've helped.
Okay. And we've been assured by them that there are courses that fit these descriptions, but we also know that these courses can be offered outside of the English department. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that we need to find other resources outside of the English department.
You need
for
to
the
do that,
introductory
but
English
also you're going to have to
written
find,
communication classes.
it's going to drop the amount of writing instruction in this university by half. It's a serious problem.
The important component to understand is that we were given 33 to 34 credit hours to work into a general education program. We also know that these competencies should be carried into the major program. And what we have indicated in our report and will continue to develop is that it's going to be up to the major to say, our students need more writing. Our students need more quantitative reasoning. Our students need more diversity and equity. And to find those places in the curriculum or on campus to suit those needs. Those courses can come in the program requirements within the very same discipline. They could come in courses outside of the discipline that are just included in the program. So there is a lot of opportunity, but it is very intentional because we were only given 33 to 34 credit hours that we are going to turn to the majors to say, there is more to do. All we can do with this program is establish a foundation. There is more learning that has to be had, but you know best what your students need. So if your students need more writing, tell us where they can get that. Can they get that in all of the 400 levels that they take in your curriculum? We hear from a lot of programs, our students write so much in these courses. Well, now you can say, look, this is where it happens in our program. It happens at every 400 level course. But you can also say, look, our students need more diversity and equity, and we don't have that in our curriculum. We can reach out to other departments and we can reinforce that learning within our own curriculum, but to the extent that is needed by our students. So instead of general education indicating that a student needs to have an additional writing intensive, an additional speaking intensive, and those sorts of things with the markers that confused things, we are leaving it up to the major programs to say this is an appropriate curriculum for our specific students. So instead of general education delivering that answer, the faculty will instead choose that answer for their own students.
I wish that were true, but in fact, what we know is that given a choice between teaching writing in a course and having the number of seats available in the course either go up or down, you know what they're going to have to pick just due to the sheer economics of it. So anyway, I'm concerned about this.
I'm going to ask you guys to look in the crystal ball a little bit. I'm thinking about the process by which existing courses get approved to the new gen ed. And I'm wondering if you've thought, maybe you have, about, is it going to be easy? I mean, how much change are faculty going to have to do? I mean, it's sounding to me from this end like almost every one of these things is going to require a pretty substantial change to whatever course you want to fit it into many of these competencies. And so
each of the working groups, one of the bullet points, they wanted to, are there current courses that we think could fit within these competencies right now? And all the working groups had a nice list of courses that we felt would work. There would be some tweaking, et cetera, but the SLOs are not finalized yet. So there is going to be some drafting. That's sort of our next phase, is actually drafting the SLOs, and that language can change. But honestly, looking at all the working groups, it didn't seem as big of a daunting task as it looks. Like, oh my God, we have to change everything. No, we actually were able to not only find courses, but we're actually looking back historically at the number of seats and sections available and saying, can we handle the incoming student body? And we were able to handle it. We were able to handle it through the writing courses, through the speaking courses, how many sections have historically been offered at the current class sizes. And we actually did the math, and we were able to actually handle it. Now, we are also hoping that by these SLOs, we are allowing new courses, new instructors, and new programs to find, you know what? I never had a diversity and equity because we never had that attribute before, but we already teach this. We have a course which basically is doing this. We can apply for this attribute. So I think even though existing courses may have to tweak a little bit, I think there's going to be some new courses who see, like, we can fit in this, we can change, we can modify. So we don't think it's yes, it's going to be change, but based on what we have seen, the data that we were able to pull, actually running the numbers, we don't think it's going to be as daunting as it actually really does seem. There is a very high number of courses that we think could really roll over and transition well into this new program. Anticipating that the SLOs are going to tweak a little bit, and the content experts in those fields can really help us match the SLOs with courses to make that transition even a little easier. Hope that answers your question.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, that's encouraging. But,
yeah.
I mean, we're moving from a system that's about content, basically, with writing and speaking layered on top of that, but still basically in content classes, right? And so we're moving now to something that's allegedly measuring competency. I forget how Jody put it at the beginning, but that's not really the same thing. You know, if a student is going to be competent personally at diversity, you know, that might not simply happen simply by studying medieval Europe.
No, and that's
make them diverse. I'm just using myself as an example, not saying I will do that, but that requires a different kind of instruction.
Yep, and that's why the next phase is not only the SLOs, but developing rubrics that we can say this is pivotal or this is competent based on rubrics, based on what we as a faculty and content experts deem this is how we're going to evaluate how do you appreciate diversity or how do you understand diversity, et cetera. So that is already in the works. Is a lot of this has already been done with the AAC&U value rubrics. We're using a lot of their data, a lot of what they already have, so we don't have to completely reinvent the wheel. We're obviously going to modify it to fit what we are doing here at UNCG. We're not going to try to fit a round peg into a square hole, whatever way it is. But these rubrics, the way we are developing with the content experts, should actually really help us and help all instructors be very consistent on how we are saying, yes, these students are competent in this are pivotal or competent in this particular competency based on these rubrics that have been developed. And that's sort of our next phase moving forward.
Apologies for interrupting, but because I would like us to have enough time for this discussion as well as to complete the agenda, could we entertain a motion for a 20-minute extension?
We've heard a lot of faculty say, my course will fit in there. I can see we're already doing that. I teach critical thinking in my fine arts course. We can do this.
I thought it important that we spend time to for the task force and council representatives to address questions about the Girder 2 proposal. So I am seeking a motion to extend the general faculty meeting for an additional 15 minutes so that we may hear from Senate committee chairs. I have a motion. A second? Second. All in favor of extending the general faculty meeting convocation 15 minutes, say aye. Opposed? Well, the ayes have it. And I'm just going to ask committee chairs to come up in order where they appear in the agenda: Government Committee, Non-Tenure Track, Due Process, and Faculty Welfare. And I will leave it to you to introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Yarborough. I'm the chair of the Government Committee. The rest of my committee consists of Greg Bell, Patty Sink, Igor Arovinko, and Chanel James. Currently, we don't have a senator liaison. Anthony asked me to just simply remind you of some changes that are taking place this semester. As you know, last spring, we approved a new constitution, and that new constitution has new election rules in it. At the same time that we approved the constitution, we approved some transition rules, which gave a schedule by which certain things have to be done this semester. And Anthony thought it'd be a good idea to remind the general faculty that these things have to be done, or you may end up not having any senator in your unit if these don't happen. So by October the 21st, each electoral division has to determine their election method according to Article 2B9, which I'll talk about in just a second, and establish their election committees. By October the 31st, the division election committees have to submit their written election and appointment procedures to the Senate's elections and appointments committees. That's a very firm date. In other words, starting with this new constitution that's now in place, every unit has to have its own election rules that have to follow certain rules that are in the Constitution, and those have to be approved by the Senate before you can elect any senators. Okay? So if these don't happen by these dates, it may very well be that your unit won't have a senator or any senator. And then by November the 29th, two things will have to happen. The chair of the Senate will have to approve those election and appointment procedures, and the Senate Elections and Appointments Committee will then alert each division's election committee about the vacancies they have to fill in their elections, and give the electoral divisions committees a date by which they must submit their appointments and election results. Could you go to the next slide, please? Since we're running short on time, I'm not going to go over all of these, but if you'll simply go to the Constitution, look at Article 2B9, you'll see there's 3 slides worth here of rules that go A through G, that each one of these election procedures, each unit's election procedures has to abide by. As members of the faculty, you should be aware of these and make sure that your unit is abiding by these rules. These rules are meant to ensure that everyone is appropriately represented in the Senate, that everyone gets a vote, that there's not going to be any more, sometimes you do and sometimes you don't kind of stuff. And you need to read these rules and make sure that your unit's abiding. Unless there are any questions, that's all I've got to say. Okay, thank you.
I'm Regina McCoy, and I'm from the non-tenure track faculty committee. And just for saving time, just want to make sure that you know that we are working within most units here and at UNC Greensboro. And some of the main issues that our non-tenure track faculty have asked about are emeritus status. So that's one thing we're looking at. How do we have a standardized policy for being able to offer emeritus status to non-tenure track faculty? For example, we've had a faculty member recently, I believe it was that had served the UNC community for about 30 years, but she's not able to have that status because that's not something that's written in for non-tenure track faculty. Another one is phased retirement. Also wanted to make sure that non-tenure track faculty could be able to be eligible for phased retirement. That's something that our committee is looking at. Is that something that's doable? What are the parameters around that? And then bringing that back to the Senate. And one last thing that our committee discussed is terms of appointment for non-tenure track faculty. For example, I'm in the School of Health and Human Sciences, and we are called academic professionals, whereas in other divisions, they're called clinical professors, or they may be a lecturer, instructors. So one of the things about that is that the terms for all of those different areas are different. The other thing is that when you are, one of the issues that came up with another group in, I believe, the Bryan School, that when you are someone that goes up for promotion, you're not necessarily offered, your contract may be different than other people who have gone for promotion, so they wanted some uniformity there. And also, who pays for potential promotions? Do you get a raise? Does that come from the provost office, or does that come from the different units? So we do not have the answers, but what we're doing is hopefully we'll spend this year investigating that. We do need to have, because of some changes, representation from the Joint School of Nanoscience and Nanoengineering and the School of Education. So if you want to be nice and nominate your colleagues, let me know.
My name is Vidya Gargeya, and I'm representing the Due Process Committee. Christopher Paulos is the committee chair this year, but this fall semester he's on research assignment. And so I'm serving in an interim role as chair. And we have 2 members who are in the audience. We have Kathleen Williams. Hey, Kathleen, just wave your hand. And we have Alan Goldfarb back there. They're all here to give me support. And we do not have a representative from the university libraries. We had Keith Gorman last year, and he has left the university, so we are looking for a replacement. Ideally, we would also like to get a representative or a person in place of Chris Paulos this semester. And what we were thinking about the Due Process Committee is to somehow work through a faculty forum to understand the issues of due process, so that an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. So what are the kinds of issues that will come towards or come from the faculty that we want to document and at least do something? Because most of these cases typically come in the spring semester, whoever is looking at. But before that, we can also have a faculty forum on that subject. Okay, if you have any questions, I'm willing to take them. Thank you.
I'm Lori Kennedy Malone. I'm chair of the Faculty Welfare and Compensation Committee. And I can say that our committee is actually missing a representative from the College of Visual and Performing Arts, so we would appreciate a membership there. One of the things that's going to occur this year is the university is going to administer the coach survey. The last time that occurred was in 2015. That's a survey that comes from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And the last time, if you recall, we had the survey, we had the data, and then actually a task force was put together to look at the data, come up with recommendations and so forth. So one of the things that not only my committee, but representatives from some of the other committees like the non-tenure track faculty issue committee, the professional development committee, had concerns about was some of the questions that are concerns to us at UNCG are not always in these type of surveys. So a couple of years ago, we were going to try to do an internal survey, but we thought they were going to do the coach survey last year. That being said, one of the things that I did get a hold of is the survey that will be administered in the spring. What I can tell you, if you recall from the last time, there were some problems in the previous survey. There really weren't a lot of questions that pertain to non-tenure track faculty issues. And what we would recommend is that there's an optional model that's included that actually has a series that looks like of about 10 questions. It pertained to some things like contract renewal in my department, sense of whether my contract will be renewed, issues of promotion. So we'll be able to actually collect data on the non-tenure track faculty. What will certainly be important is that the faculty, even though as we hear, are often called a different title, that would be the section that they should specifically reply to. Another optional module has to do with tenure reasonableness. So that would probably be a section that in particular the pre-tenure folks would want to answer. But as we know, the way surveys go, it won't be administered until the spring, and then it'll take a while till we go through. That being said, in conversation with Anthony, I think he's like right behind me, is that we really need to get a pulse of what's going on like right now, because we really wanted a pulse of that a couple years ago. So what we're looking at doing is a couple of things. And one thing is to try to collect some short questions from all faculty. Because one thing I have found out is, and I don't know about the rest of you who are chairs of committees, but and even senators, when you're representing a group of folks, how do you actually get the pulse? How do you find out from your constituents what the issues are? And it's not always easy, especially if we need something really quickly. So in sending out a series of short questions, maybe we can get some answers fairly quickly and hopefully be proactive so that when we get the results of the coach survey, maybe we're a little ahead of the game. So thank you.
We managed to do a little, do well on our time here, and I'll just ask, are there any questions of any of the committee chairs that that you would like them to address? Seeing no hands, may I have a motion to adjourn? I got it. We got it. Third. What is that? Thirded. Well, all those in favor of adjournment, say aye. Nays? The ayes have it, and please remember that we have a reception over the Alumni House with our partners, UTLC. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate your questions.
What about this, this one? Oh, yeah. Dr. Chow, can you hear me? Was there anything else today you needed me to do?
I was wondering if possibly you could ask Andrea to, are you using your laptop?
Yeah, I can, I have it up, yeah.
Okay. If I could talk to Andrea real quickly, maybe give you my cell number. You have my cell number, but let me just.
Yeah, I sent you mine via text.
If ask Andrea if she has time to just give me a call. Just wanted to debrief with her real fast.
Okay, sure.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Cam.
Right. I'll be right back.
All right.
Okay, she said that she's going to the reception, but if you could text or email her sometimes that when you'll be available for her to call you.
Great. Sounds good. All right. Thank you very much, Cam.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Did you think it ran smoothly, pretty smoothly today?
I thought it went very smoothly. What did you think?
Yeah, I was surprised, to tell you the truth. I was a little afraid doing it, but James was nice and helped some too. But yeah.
James, if you can hear me, thank you for all that you did. And again, you guys did a great job. And we had one person join us. I'm sure, next time we'll have many more. Certainly, part of our challenge was not advertising it as much as we should have, and so we'll definitely look to do that, do a better job of that next time. So
Okay. All right.
anyway, all right, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
You too.
Okay, bye bye.